close my eyes. Then I couldn't find a way, so I settled for one day to believe in you. Tell me lie.
Charles.
Jason, how are you?
I'm very well. Welcome to Sunday. Really Bad Liars, Charles.
And we've got, I think, a special guest, much in demand.
Well, and actually, I have a surprise for both you and our special guest. We announced it, of course, in the preview, but we've got the French fraud terminator with us. And, you know, my French is pretty weak, Charles, so I had to look up the translation. I think I got it right here. It's Le Terminator. Yeah. Fabien, welcome back to the program. Lovely to have you. I spelled it correctly, right?
Surprise. Thank you very much for the surprise, guys.
My, how you've improved so much with age, Fabien.
Well, it's wonderful to have you back. Undisclosed location, somewhere in the world.
True. Yeah. Not in Manhattan.
No. So, Charles, what will we be discussing today?
Well, why don't we flip to the page here. This is a movie that is just coming out it's actually called The Good Liars. And you'll see it soon, Jason, on buses and so on.
I'm definitely not going to see this.
Yeah, no, actually, it's got a very good cast. It's got Helen Mirren, and I've seen the preview on television. It seems like a pretty good movie. But we've been living this movie, The Really Bad Liars, for now 4.5 years, more than 4.5 years.
Yes.
And we're at a stage, and it's so great to have Fabien with us here, Fabien Chalandon, man of the world, but not globalist, a nationalist man of the world. As we teeter-totter, really rush towards this November 15th deadline, where I think the liars, the Clintons and those who support these liars, are finally going to be exposed for what they actually are, and that is ringleaders for the largest set of frauds ever attempted worldwide. So, hats off to the art department.
Thank you.
We could probably jump right into the slides. There's a lot of material. We're going to be breaking some big news here that's just come in the last hour or so.
Yes, the slides. Well, do we want to just, for people who are joining us, it's been some time since Fabien's last appearance. Do we want to just give a brief introduction so people know exactly what to expect?
Sure. I think Fabien is one of my oldest, dearest friends. He's not that old, but he's been a friend for a long time, and we've done all sorts of things together in various guises. Fabien, maybe you could just say a few words about yourself to the audience, some of whom know you very well already.
Yes, well, you know, we probably met in the late 80s. We were investment bankers at Dillon Reed, and we went through a lot of M&A transactions and investments. Some of them went wrong, so we had to restructure them. And we did that on basically 3 different continents. I myself also went a bit sideways into French politics, not being elected, but being part of Jacques Chirac's presidential campaign in 1994, and then setting up and co-managing the first independent think tank in France called Fondation Concorde for about 10 years. Breaking taboos, which was actually the motto and the organizational purpose of this foundation, which is a quite dangerous job in France, actually. So you should know, and probably too in the US, from what I can see today. So basically, we've been keeping in touch, and when Charles started investigating the Clinton Foundation in about early 2015, he asked me to follow up his work closely, which I did, and at one point I actually jumped into it because the largest individual donor to this unlawful and fraudulent charity is actually the French taxpayer, which would surprise a lot of people, but we've been dumb enough to invest prorated about over $300 million into this charity, which does not look good. So I've been then progressively caught up and fascinated and captivated by not only the Clinton Foundation, but also the US political scene, in the middle of which sits obviously the Clinton Foundation scandal, and which obviously also the Clinton camp has tried to ensure that nothing comes out of it. And Charles did an incredible job in not only investigating it, but also pushing it in the open, and despite what you call fake media's repetitive attempt to shut him down. I think that would be in summary, Charles, would short summary, actually, because long version could take 2 hours.
No, thank you, Fabien, for all your help. Indeed, this is such a large scandal, and it touches so many people in the countries that have given money to something that actually is a fraud, and then into the countries where the money was supposed to go and where it didn't go. Places like Haiti, where France has had a long interest in Haiti, and that country stands today as a nation state really without realistic hope. After more than $10 billion was sent towards Haiti, the electrical power is not working, the roads aren't working, the hospitals aren't working, the people aren't working, and it's getting to be about as desperate a situation as it's ever been in the past. We owe a debt of gratitude to the ancient French government for actually helping this country to come into being as the United States of America way back when. And I think in Haiti, France and the United States do share responsibility and perhaps a common interest in maybe going in and using Haiti as a case study of how not to give aid to a country. And then instead of writing fancy reports and making excuses, we need to roll up our sleeves and do what we can, if possible, to try to restore a sense of order and promise and hope to that small nation of only, I think, 10 million people or thereabouts. So we're here. We built this up. This is, I think, our 187th show together, Jason. And we now, for the first time, 5 days from now, have a very serious deadline coming up where not only do the Clinton Foundation and its affiliated charities have to report, but all the donors that are private foundations or public charities that gave money to the Clinton Foundation who may have a year end of December 31st, they have a final filing deadline as well to get their act together correctly by the 15th of November 2019. And I will reveal for the first time, perhaps, that we have laid an enormous trap here for the Clintons and for these donors. There really is no simple way out for them. It's a question of how much pain do they want to earn and buy. If they fail to file corrected statements by the 15th of November 2019, thinking that they can gutball this through the 2020 election and maybe somebody else will win or maybe Donald Trump will, they are going to buy a lot more liability in terms of financial penalties, jail time, et cetera, than if one or more people jump on the pile of people who may already be talking to the IRS and various governments around the world explaining what truly did happen here. So this house of cards is going to come down. It's going to affect a lot of people around the world. I think it can be used constructively as a way to bring charity laws in the United States and other countries up to date. The last time we, in this country, updated our charity laws was in 1969, so our private foundation laws. So this is a good opportunity for people across the political spectrum to look at this mess and say, enough of these Clintons, enough of the people in the Obama and Bush administrations who covered this mess up, enough of all that. We've got to move forward together. There are only so many good causes out there. You'll see a lot of sob stories on television, et cetera. Some of them are justified, but actually a lot more money flows towards the truly destitute than the truly destitute can, at this stage, constructively harness for their benefit. And so on the periphery are a whole bunch of charity thieves. That's what the Clintons are, that's what the Obamas are, and that's frankly what the Bushes were, because they didn't do their jobs. They didn't think about what was really happening. And they allowed taxpayers and good-hearted individuals and foundations to send hundreds of billions, trillions of dollars to address problems that sounded like they could be addressed by these charities. And then instead of addressing the problems, much of that money was stolen. So if we can jump into the next page quickly, Jason and Fabien, and then we'll get into the recent developments. Jason has got some subscriber growth, I think, built up now. You're at 85,600 subscribers in the main channel, and I don't know, 10 or so on the other channel.
Actually, it's exceeded 12,000 on Crowdsource the Truth,
right,
too. And you know, Charles, while we are under this this strike, I've learned actually that there were multiple strikes on the channel last week. There's a strike on the main YouTube channel that prevents live streaming, so a lot of people might be watching this on the Crowdsource the Truth 2 YouTube channel. People can also watch on subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. It's possible for the next 90 days live streaming will be cut on the main YouTube channel. And also Facebook, I learned, had a strike because we mentioned a certain Italian 33-year-old State Department employee's name, and right away, Facebook said, nah. So there's no live streaming on Facebook either.
It's amazing. It's too much power in the hands of people who don't really have the experience or the inclination, in my view, to try to report anything objectively.
But it's also bad because you can apparently say stuff without evidence to implicate any person, including the President of the United States. But if you mention the name of the person who brings forward this information without evidence, then you get punished.
Yeah, it's outrageous. But so what this show is, though, and for the new viewers, this is a joint effort. And Fabien is an important part of the team, a very important part of the team. There are people who are helping us around the world move this forward and not simply write about it, but bring it to the government authorities so that things can be investigated, prosecuted, and malefactors can be convicted and sent to prison and pay fines. So this is a cooperative exercise. I'm very gratified at the growth in my Twitter feed and the interest in this. We see a lot of, Jason and I see a lot of these retweets of our shows. You can get information directly to me through my site and on Twitter by following me and then sending me a direct message. I appreciate all kinds, as Jason does, all kinds of constructive criticism. In that vein, one of our most active and loyal viewers pointed out that I misidentified last show John Hope Bryant's Operation Hope, that 3M had funded Operation Hope. In fact, it had funded something called Project Hope, which sounds very similar, and I confuse it to be Operation Hope. So that's, as they say among the hip crowd, which I'm not a part of, my bad. But we do appreciate both constructive ideas, as compliments are nice, but criticisms are actually more helpful because they allow us to learn how to do things better. So thank you for that, and please keep them coming. Perhaps, Jason, we rush through the playlist just to give people the handy-dandy playlist.
Yes, and people can still access that even though we're under strike. But that's got all of the videos, Charles, and we've recently taken to reinstating Charles Ortel as closing in on Wednesdays. So it's the 1-2 punch happening now. And this, as you said, is our 187th video. I think a lot of people are aware, Charles, that each of these videos, almost all of them, contain a comprehensive presentation put together by you. And people can access them just by clicking on the video. And once it loads here, we got a lot of data transmitting over the internet. But once it loads, below the title, below the description section, I have got a link to the PDF documents that you've created. I'm not able to scroll right now. People can see that spinning. There we go. So sometimes you need to click this little show more, and it will show you more.
Funny thing.
Oh boy, it's really going slowly. It's amazing. You know, normally the internet is very fast here. I wonder. Okay, so there we go. You just gotta click on show more. Anyway, you click show more, you click on the link to download Charles's presentation, and it will download. If you want to try to live stream and have a Skype caller while you do this, you may experience some slowdown on your computer, but let's just get right to it, shall we, Charles?
Let's do that. Let's do that. So we're going to start here just bringing people up to date on the next page, and I shouldn't give short shrift to the art department for its consistent high-quality production. Thanks for that.
Thank you very much.
We've had a development, Fabien, I don't know today if you've had a chance to follow this, but in the first, this is reporting from, and I really am loath to put a CNN link into any one of my presentations, but here's the first link here is a CNN story where the Lord High, or the Lord Low Executioner, Representative Adam Schiff, in America we put in parentheses either D for Democrat and the state. Whenever you list a representative, that's what you're supposed to do. So I'm now calling him Adam Schiff, in parentheses, Dunce from California, not D. He has decided that the whistleblower's testimony is, in his words, redundant and unnecessary. Let me think this thing through. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I would have thought in this country where we have a constitution and a tradition that comes out of the bad experiences in the English Civil War, when a Republican, well, first a monarch went crazy, and then the Republican government went even crazier, we're going to allow the following process: that a whistleblower comes forward through a law firm, a supposed law firm, that's supposedly regulated by the DC Bar and consists of supposedly non-conflicted and upstanding people. We're going to get to that in a second, because that ain't the case. And this law firm starts working for one whistleblower, who triggers an impeachment inquiry, a quasi-impeachment inquiry. The first whistleblower, the history is, Schiff has decided that the first whistleblower is no longer necessary. So the second whistleblower comes along and whips everybody up into a frenzy, leaks all over the place through Washington, D.C., talking head exploding after talking head exploding. Now the chairman of the Intelligence, it should be the Lack of Intelligence Committee in the House, Schiff, is spearheading a, quote, impeachment inquiry, which was set in place not by a formal vote of the House, but by Nancy Pelosi, who, if Trump were removed and if Pence were removed, would become president of the United States by the order of succession. So there's no conflict there. You know, whips everybody up into a frenzy. And the Republicans were told when Schiff had his big press conference and hearings last week, Republicans are going to get a chance to call witnesses. Trump is going to have a chance to have his own counsel. Cross-examination is going to be possible. Short deadline is given of yesterday for the Republicans to list the witnesses they want. And Schiff immediately comes back and says, none of them. You can't have any of them. With that act, I think Schiff has cut his own throat. Yeah. Because at this point, whether the people in Washington, D.C. want to believe it or not, fair-minded people, you know, from probably the first grade and up, thinking about this, and for first grader would be a 6-year-old person in this country, roughly, thinking about this idea that somebody can accuse you of a non-crime. We haven't heard of a single crime here that will trigger then an investigation with the full resources of one of the 3 co-equal branches of government will be trained upon you, and that you'll have to incur the substantial expense and, you know, the indignity of the entire world saying you've been stand accused now of an uncertain process that could culminate in your losing your job. That could happen to the President of the United States, not let alone me or Jason or, you know, some other American, is a gross abuse of the office of Representative of the United States. It's a gross abuse, in my judgment, of the office of the Speaker of the House, and it is something that now cries out. We are now, I think, in a full-blown, true constitutional crisis here, because we don't simply have the option for the Senate to receive whatever vote comes out of the House and say, we're not going to consider it, which is, I think, what I would do if I were in the Senate. This is not a valid impeachment. We have to go further than that, and we have to redefine what impeachment is, what the rules are here, and make absolutely clear that Adam Schiff or another Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi do not have the rights that they have abused and taken and are exercising now to do this to anyone, let alone to the President of the United States. This is a gross affront to the Constitution and to the traditions in this country. And I think Americans and fair-minded people are going to see this for what it is. It is a naked, hard coup attempt against the President of the United States. And the plotters behind this must be exposed. They must be investigated. They must be prosecuted. They must be punished. And you know, this could even rise to the level of sedition and treason. This is not simply, you know, a political dispute. This is a bunch of folks, and we can guess who they might be backed by, trying to take down the duly elected President of the United States in a television spectacle. That's what we have here. And so I'm sorry to get so worked up, but we're in a holiday weekend here where Monday is an important holiday. It's Veterans Day. It's where we remember the great patriots who shed their blood, you know, who died, and worse, I think, it is to be maimed and, you know, horribly injured and have your mind screwed up by the horrors of war. Tomorrow we honor those people. And while these criminals dishonor the very soul and heart that makes this country truly exceptional. So we are in a moment now where you can't just sit there and have a little opinion. You need to think deeply about whether you want this precedent to stand. And if you don't want it to stand, you need to reach out to your congresspeople, to your senators, to elected officials, and you need to force people to bring this to a head and get behind who is orchestrating this coup attempt and how do we go from where we are now in this mess to a happier place. So,
yeah, if I may interject, Charles, I mean, this, you know, this whole issue of how President Trump is treated has obviously international impact. So that's why not only Americans but also foreigners like me are very concerned. The second thing I would like to say is that looking at how Mr. Schiff operates,
I didn't know.
and you know that name now, well. And looking also at all these lawyers from lawfare operate, they're actually subverting the U.S. institution by weaponizing the court system and the U.S. justice system. And that is a big problem because the damage occurs immediately, but the vindication only comes after 1 or 2 years once the courts have dealt with the issue and it's too late. So, you know, that has to stop. And these people have to be prosecuted one way or the other. And I'm sure there is an angle to it. Now, you talk about sedition, rebellion. I've seen this, Lieutenant General, was it Vimont, I can't remember his name.
Yeah, Vindman.
Basically, Vindman saying that, you know, he thought he didn't like the policies of of his president. I mean, what is that? And I'm kind. Okay?
Yeah.
What is that shift? Huh? What is that shift? Okay? No, but you have a member of the U.S. Army just suddenly deciding he doesn't like the policy of his boss, and he whistleblows. What is that? I mean, it's a joke. You know, it's a joke. I mean, who is going to give any credibility to the people behind this attempted coup, which is obviously an attempted coup, either today, tomorrow, or the day after? Nobody in Europe, nobody in the rest of the world.
Yeah.
So, you know, this is a serious seditious attempt, and I'm sure there are laws in the US who can stop it, and that's the job of Mr. Barr.
Yeah,
exactly. Those are good.
That's what I wanted to say, and not only for Americans, also for other people in the rest of the world. You see, we're distraught, you know, Mr. Trump being assailed by a bunch of thugs, basically, and very sick people in their mind, very sick.
Exactly. And, you know, one of the core strategic weaknesses of this country, and indeed of many countries, is that rather than actually diversifying the pipelines between power and from power to the people. What we have created is a very limited number of pipelines that can be cut off. As you were mentioning earlier in the show, if Facebook cuts you off, if Google cuts you off, if a bank cuts you off, then we only have 4 or 5 big banks in this country. If these big tech companies cut you off, the mainstream media is already not going to listen to you, and academia is not going to listen to you, and the brand name NGOs are not going to listen to you. And so we're actually in a place now where it's tougher to get exposed dissenting views. It's tougher to expose corruption, because the corruption, the big corruption that's being carried on around the world, is being carried on by the establishment, by the people who are so terrified of draining the swamp and what Trump is trying to do. So we're in an unusual place, but there's some good news. Here in the second story here, we have, if you look at what's going on, we have a male in Bullshift, we have a male former prosecutor railroading a possible defendant, okay? And when you think about it, you look at the story in that way, a powerful man abusing a potentially vulnerable defendant. That is the tale of women everywhere. And even in this country in 2019. And I think in part for that reason, we have this story saying that donations, believe it or not, are surging for Trump from women. That women and fair-minded people are looking at this and saying, this is just not right. He's suburban woman donors, 8.3 million.
How much did Stormy Daniels give?
But seriously, Elizabeth Warren got 3.9.
Wow.
This is an interesting story.
Yeah.
And I think you're going to see, and it's only starting to play out. This holiday, we do honor our fallen and veterans. It's not in the same league as July 4th or Labor Day or holiday weekends or whatever. But it's a period of time now where the press, many people who work for the established press will be on vacation. So we won't really get the full flavor for how Schiff's power grab is playing out. But I don't think it's going to go well for him in the end. Now, meanwhile, in this Lucian link, we're starting to see, and there are many, many stories that are out there in the press now of charities being taken down. You can't, when you follow this link to the original article, don't do it, Jason, because it's broken for some reason. But here is somebody. Now, I don't know what it is with the cosmic way in which people develop names, but you're sitting there, and there's nothing magical about my name or Jason's name or Fabien's name. You're sitting there and you're a crook, and you want to go get a crooked charity person to raise money for your crooked charity. Is the first person you're going to pick, you want to get out of the authorities' eyes, do you want to pick somebody called Dixon Slingerland to raise your money?
I didn't even see that. I thought you were talking about MC Squared. I was like, this is related to MC Search, and they found a way to sneak in a 3, Charles.
There you go. But the point being is we're starting to see, and for a reason, Fabien, and Jason, we're starting to see these stories because November 15th is a date that's taken seriously around charities, just like April 15th for individuals. So typically the IRS and the authorities, they want to try to make examples of charities right around this filing deadline. But we're at last beginning to see that government authorities, and this is in California, not exactly a pro-Trump state, they're going to make an issue here over a $1.7 million problem with a charity. $1.7 million. The Clinton Foundation does that in a day, easily. The interest on what they owe for their fraud is probably more than $1.7 million a day. Wow. And so this is actually, in my mind, somewhat encouraging that we're starting to see more and more of these things happen. So back in the slides. Another hopeful thing, the great Thomas Lifson, who runs American Thinker, is hazarding conjecture here that it's Lisa Page who has been talking, who's decided to abandon the coup conspiracy and dish on what really happened. That could be when she learned, I think she was married and she was cheating on her husband with Strzok. But when I think she learned that Strzok, who was married and was cheating on his wife with Lisa Page, was cheating on both his wife and Lisa Page with yet a third person, that could be the reason, perhaps, why Lisa Page is like, this is crazy. I mean, I've had enough of this.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a top lawyer at the FBI Justice Complex. I'm breaking the law to try to topple a duly elected president. That person seems to be stuck in the saddle, could be reelected. I think I'll probably break ranks and maybe protect my ass, is what this guy speculates. So, and here's this awful person, Benjamin Wittes,
Oh, yes.
who's tweeting out a warning tweet to Lisa Page. The story is that Lifton noticed that his suspicion is that Page may be cooperating, and Wittes puts this tweet out to signal to Lisa Page that he's watching what she's doing.
He's a thug.
He is another thug.
He's got to go down. Ben Wittes responded to a tweet where I implored him to tell us what he knows about the death of Peter Smith. And, Charles, he mocked me in the response, but it was very interesting to see that he tweeted it to Shane Harris and Matt Tate. I didn't mention them in my tweet, but he seems to know that they know something about the death of Peter Smith as well.
Yeah, very interesting indeed. Interesting. So back into the slides, we're going to now, another piece of good news is from our friend at Gateway Pundit has a story out that apparently that somebody in Trump's communications office tweeted out that dreaded phrase TikTok, which we've been hearing is a sign that things are about to happen, and then of course nothing happens, like Charlie Brown in the football. But however, Jim Hoft points out in this longish piece that Trump himself made some comments in a presser, I think on Thursday or Friday. See, here's your TikTok from Dan Scavino. And then he said, I caught the swamp, Trump said. Let's see what happens. Nobody else could have done it but me. And I hope he's got this under control.
Yeah.
But this is on November 8th at 11:20 a.m. So today's the 10th. That would be Friday.
Notice it's not 11:33 a.m.
Exactly, that's true.
Worth mentioning. Well, that's interesting, Charles. I love it when President Trump says things that don't quite make sense but still make me laugh. How do you catch a swamp? It would run through your fingers.
That's true. So on this topic, we have some breaking news we're going to get into in a second, but the story that appeared, this caught my interest a number of days ago on Zero Hedge, where it was revealed that this is a separate part of it, but it was revealed that anti-Trump partisans had been visiting the Obama White House many, many times, including this person whose name we're not supposed to say, as well as a whole bunch of other people. Charlie, exactly. So there are, Sarah Carter, who's a fine investigative journalist, has been working on this. And there's a lot of detail in this piece about how many times and on what, 27 times, who the people are, what were they doing. A real FBI, if Christopher Wray were really doing his job now, would be able to go back in and say, no, wait a minute, we're not going to pick this ball up on January 20th, 2017. There's a reason why Donald Trump is being aggressively targeted, and we need to get to the bottom of what would drive lawyers and people with a lot to lose reputationally and financially. What would drive them to try to take down the President of the United States? What are they trying to hide and protect? What was going on back in 2015? The second story here is this next Zero Hedge story down here. Yeah. This is one that describes the firm that...
Oh, this guy.
Yeah, the firm that was trying to work with the whistleblower. So a law firm with an attorney named Mark Zaid.
That's not the Subway sandwich guy?
No.
Looks like him.
It does, yeah. That's not a good comparison, actually.
No.
But it says here that it's described in this article, it cannot be, if you go make it a little smaller, the attorney is described as somebody who founded the anti-Trump nonprofit Whistleblower Aid in 2017. Okay, You cannot, in our country, have a nonprofit that is anti a politician or for a politician. You can't do that. So I read this and I say right away there's a problem. In the last 2 or 3 days I've been rifling through the files, and I have some big news to break shortly. But here's a tweet that this fellow put out. If you go, yeah, this is July 1st, 2017. We will get rid of him. Okay, remember July 1st, 2017. And earlier on January 30th, if you go down a little bit more, right here, coup has started. First of many steps, rebellion. Impeachment will follow ultimately. And this, if you go down further down, January 30th, 2017. Okay, so who the hell is this Mark Zaid? Who is his law firm, and what is this whistleblower aid entity? I have news for you. Whistleblower aid is a complete fraud. It is just like the Clinton Foundation. It was not organized lawfully. It was not operated lawfully. It never validly secured tax exemption as a public charity. It's never been operated independently from its creators, and it therefore is not as advertised. And we have a law firm, the Compass Rose Law Firm, that is where Mark Zaid works, he's a partner there, is intimately involved and has been intimately involved perpetrating a massive hoax under the guise and protection of their legal banners, that they're lawyers, that they're members of the bar. These people have been making a mockery of the law. And we will show you exactly the details that lead us to that conclusion in a few minutes. It's important as you... Sorry?
Sorry, and a mockery of the bar.
Of the bar, and yeah, the non-alcohol bar. But it's what we're going to reveal, Jason, and I've sent you a this just in thing. I don't know if you'll be able to get it, or we can Google the firm. It might be easier to do it that way. Maybe it's easier, Jason, to Google the firm, which would be Compass Rose Law Firm.
I find it interesting that all these law firms have Rose in their name.
Yeah,
I did also, coincidentally, Charles, happen to look up the Internal Revenue Code related to using a 501c3 for any sort of partisan political activity, and it has very specific and extremely strict language prohibiting any such activity whatsoever. Even potentially advocating, let's say, for a particular candidate for vice president, strictly prohibited.
Yeah, not good. So let's look at this for a second. This is a law firm that has on the top of it, says Intelligence Community Whistleblower Matter. Now, in some of the previous broadcasts, I have talked to you about the fact that the Inspector General of the Intelligence Committee triggered an investigation on July 6, 2015, into Hillary Clinton's mishandling of classified information. And initially when I heard that, I thought to myself, that probably means the person who did that, remember this is during the Obama administration, after Hillary has announced her candidacy to be president, the Democrat candidate, and then ultimately the presidential candidate in 2015-16. Here's somebody who says, wait a minute, no, I need to have an investigation of her mishandling. The existence of such an investigation, had it been widely known through the primary period, should have cost her the nomination. So I initially thought about that and said, well, this guy must be a really good guy, somebody we ought to get to know. It has now dawned on me, because if you go into the attorneys section here, Jason, and hit this one right here, that man, one of the 3 partners in the firm that is now representing the whistleblowers, Mr. Charles McCulloch, if that's how you pronounce his name, is the person who triggered the investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails on July 6, 2015, in his capacity as Inspector General of the Intelligence Community. So what if what they were really doing was using that investigation to vacuum the US government files of all potentially incriminating evidence of Hillary Clinton's activities while Secretary of State and afterwards, using the Clinton Foundation and other vehicles to finance the Democratic Party, to finance Democratic candidates, to enrich the Clinton family, to further the interest. What if the goal of this investigation was not to expose her, but to retrieve as much of the information as possible and make sure that the crooked FBI under Comey and the crooked Justice Department under Loretta Lynch and anybody who might come afterwards would never be in a position to get Hillary Clinton? That's, to me, and Obama for having approved that operation. So when I saw that, and this is something different, when I realized this moments ago that this fellow is one of 3 partners in the law firm that is presently defending 2 fake whistleblowers whose names we can't say, who are the points of the spear in the present battle against Donald Trump. This guy needs to be investigated. How did he end up in this tiny little firm with Mark Zaid and the other fellow who are not particularly prominent people? How did this guy, who was leading, he was Inspector General of the intelligence community, therefore he was the person who would decide, if there were problems, like Horowitz, for justice. He was the guy you'd bring in to handle the most sensitive aspects of the intelligence community. He's a cleanup batter for the intelligence community. And now he leaves that position and decides to hook up with these people who can't fill out a Form 990 properly, who don't know anything, it would seem, about charity laws, we're going to show you in a second. How did this guy end up in this law firm? And why is no serious journalist jumping where is Cheryl Atkinson on this? Where are people who understand, where's Seymour Hersh on all this? I mean, this is not, so people with long Pulitzer Prizes to their names. I mean, to get into this is so obvious at this point that whistleblower aid, which we're going to show you in a second, is not a legitimate public charity. And this law firm, which have been whipping these 2 fake whistleblowers into a frenzy now for months, they are centrally involved in this plot to get President Trump. And we saw what happened when Mueller decided that a lawyer who was involved, Michael Cohen, allegedly with Donald Trump in criminal activities, that you could pierce attorney-client privilege in that case. Why can't you pierce it here?
Yeah.
I think it's essential to pierce it here. I don't know, Fabien, if you were aware of this. You're sitting there either stunned or tired or both, but I'd be curious what you think.
I think that there's apparently a bunch of so-called lawyers who have decided to push the limits of the law beyond reasonable and weaponize the justice system. And they're just doing that on every possible front they can to destroy Mr. Trump.
It's outrageous.
And I'm sure there are laws who can make sure who can be used to prosecute these people who should be disbarred immediately.
Yeah.
Based on just what they're doing and what is becoming now public, one way or the other.
Exactly.
Now, may I just point something out very quickly to you gentlemen here? Mark Zaid, until today, I didn't realize he was part of this Compass Rose legal group because he's got his own website for the Mark Zaid law firm that looks basically exactly the same, but it's sort of positioned in such a way that it seems like a separate law firm. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think some serious attention will now, I hope, be placed on Mr. Zaid and his partners, especially Mr. McCulloch, because we've only just begun to fight. Let me, if we can, jump back into the slide, Jason, just because there's a lot of...
But just notice it doesn't show the same lawyers, or does it? Here, this is.
And this is interesting. Why would you put up on your website that you have Barry Sachs deceased as special of counsel? He must be really special.
He's the best.
If you've got problems in either heaven or hell, we've got your lawyer.
That is bizarre. Yeah. Why would they have a dead lawyer on their website?
That's a signal to all the politicians who want them to be able to handle the dead voters that they need for their...
Actually, that's probably the best lawyer in America.
So, We'll quickly fly through this. Here's another zero hedge piece, which is actually quite fascinating for several reasons. We all in this country, maybe you, Fabien, as well, have played with, when you were a kid, with Mattel toys. I certainly, when my kids were young, spent a lot of time watching Thomas the Tank Engine videos. Well, it turns out that Thomas the Tank Engine, the acquisition by Mattel of Thomas the Tank Engine's inventory or whatever, is going to tank Mattel.
Really?
Because they have to. Yeah, this is a zero hedge story saying that there's a massive hole in the books of Mattel, a publicly traded company, that's going to cause a lot of people to be fired, including accountants. There are only very few accounting firms left, but from Price Waterhouse, which is the firm that screwed up the Academy Awards famously, that screwed up the Clinton Foundation, not quite as famously yet, that screwed up, in my judgment, laureate education, has screwed up a lot of development accounting around the world. This is for the folks at BKD who want to believe that there's no real problem when people focus on the fact that year after year, filing after filing, your filings are all false and materially misleading, circulating in the public domain, and you didn't have the guts to stand up and admit your errors years ago. You thought you just cover it up and hope that maybe a pliant Democrat or pliant swamp monster would replace Donald Trump. Firms involved with this Clinton Foundation fraud and its ancillary aspects, its related aspects, need to look at this Mattel example and understand that this is a smaller set of hurt than is coming your way, because the Clinton Foundation frauds, all told around the world, probably are more in the 100 billion denomination, maybe rising to $1 trillion. This is a puny multi-billion-dollar fraud we're talking about, and we're talking about penalties in the hundreds of millions heading towards trustees or directors and accountants, maybe even to lawyers in this case. So then, back in the slides quickly, I very seldom, Fabien and Jason, do I ever agree with Bernie Sanders, but if we have this link here on Fox News.
He's hanging out with the AOC quite a bit lately.
Yeah. Well, you ain't going to buy this election the way Hillary did, or tried to, but
yeah, who's he talking to with that?
Mike Bloomberg.
Ah.
And so this is one where I actually agree. I think I've had the pleasure of meeting Mike Bloomberg a few times, and he's actually a decent human being, and he's done a lot of very thoughtful charitable giving beyond building, against determined opposition, Quotron at the time, a gigantic operation that endures and flourishes to this day. On balance, he's done a lot more good than harm, Mike Bloomberg, but he will never be president of the United States. It's not going to happen. He may even conclude that after a little trial balloon period here, that he's just going to say, on second thought, I'll support any Democrat against Trump. And I say that because Michael Bloomberg got screwed up with the Clintons in the C-40 charity fraud, which is ongoing, allowed his money and good name as chairman to be centrally involved in that. So I don't think Bloomberg, it'll be fun to watch him. The recent poll that came out last several hours shows his having reached the magnificent 4% mark, which makes it 4% higher than Eric Swalwell, but
what
still.
What about Howard Schultz? Didn't he have super billions and not able to do it?
Howard, he's out in that Arabica bean coffee plantation trying to come up with a new coffee bean for Starbucks. But then there is this story in the Washington Examiner. This is actually sort of funny and then not so funny. There's a guy, a perennial gadfly up in New Hampshire, who is trying to get himself registered in a run for president in New Hampshire as Epstein didn't kill himself.
That's the guy's name?
That's what he's filed his name as. And in some ways it's funny, but in other ways, I'm not sitting here moralizing the way everyone has a right to be believed type people were moralizing about Kavanaugh, but I would note that on the one hand, we have apologists for Epstein, we have apologists for Weinstein, and Juanita Broderick and Kathleen Willey and Paula Jones and Kathy Shelton and many others have never had their cases fairly heard by the very same people who give passes to Epstein and Weinstein and Bill Clinton, right? And so there's a certain not irony, there's a certain repugnance, frankly, that we would get the virtue signaling crowd, the far left crowd, the mainstream media, the academia, elite crowd, looking down their noses at Donald Trump while they protect Epstein, while they protect Clinton, while they protect Weinstein. And I think, those days could suddenly shift, and I hope soon.
I think, Charles, it's an incredibly strong move to make your initial press conference in your presidential run to be, done while wearing a motorcycle helmet.
And the scruffy beard also
Can't miss
works.
with that.
Yeah.
Good plug for Anton Bauer, right there.
Who's that?
That's the company that makes batteries
Okay.
for video cameras.
So if we just go to the final one there, this is actually, justice maybe coming our way. There's a way of talking, Fabien. We don't do it, but the modern young crowd gets into an auditorium, jumps up on a table or jumps up on something and starts walking up and down and back and forth and gesticulating like crazy and trying to whip a crowd up into a frenzy. And our friend AOC was doing that, and she had a very important point to make. Except she had a brain freeze and couldn't remember. Having whipped the crowd up into a frenzy, she couldn't remember her point, which is not a strong move. It's obvious that she's being fed. I think there's a team behind AOC, a team behind these other people who do a lot of polling, try to figure out catchphrases and things that people want to hear. She's given something that the team believes will catch fire. The social media engineers are ready to make it seem a thing. Only this time she stepped up to the plate and ate some dirt. So I think after a while here, old AOC is not going to end up being very A-OK.
I find the story of AOC having a brain freeze inherently implausible because it presumes she has a brain.
That's exactly what I was going to say, because she acts like a robot, but she has no brain.
Yeah.
So she doesn't think on her own foot.
No, not at all. Not in the least.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say.
All right, so let's go quickly. In New York State, this is actually good news. It happened Thursday, Friday time frame. Donald Trump has been forced to pay a further $2 million in New York State for the way in which he operated his charity, named after him, that was primarily funded by him, with some exceptions. He's forced to pay a penalty for $2 million. And this New York judge is saying that Trump owed fiduciary duties to the foundation. Of course, the Clintons, they don't owe fiduciary duties to nobody. They owe, the money that goes to the Clinton Foundation, they got bills to pay, man. The board didn't meet for 19 straight years. Does that sound at all familiar, the Clinton Foundation? And here's our distinguished idiot Attorney General of New York State saying a $2 million case, this is a precedent set by her, was one of the larger charity cases her office had worked on in recent years. A $2 million case. The Clinton Foundation is, of declared funds, $3.2 billion. So if she's going to put Donald Trump through the ringer in New York, and Donald Trump, his various buildings and projects, pays substantial taxes in this. His employees certainly pay taxes, and he pays taxes, has paid taxes in the New York State and city. You're going to put this guy through the ringer for errors, and maybe it's fair to call him out for the errors that are trivial in size compared to the Clinton Foundation. You've got a precedent. You've got to now have to explain, you're punishing Donald Trump. This is the second time now. The other one was for using Trump University. We'll get to that in a second. But you're going to let the Clintons, who are not New Yorkers, even though Hillary, in theory, represented New York as a senator, they're not born in this state. They're not doing this state proud. In fact, what they're doing is they brought Arkansas slime into this city, and they are getting they're sending the administration of justice, changing the name of that department to the administration of injustice. And the comments that are made here, the supposed expert from Notre Dame, it doesn't matter if you're in charge of the charity, it's the charity's money, not yours. Tell that to Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton.
Right, that sounds right.
Right. So this is being played. I was even at my local Starbucks, and there was a usual collection of people there that are all dissing on Trump, and there was a nice lady with her magazine, New Yorker magazine and the Sunday New York Times, saying, Donald Trump, he's gone bankrupt 6 times and he can't even run a charity. Did you hear? He's got to pay a $2 million fine. It's outrageous. And I thought of maybe saying something, but I realized if I did say something, it would quickly escalate, and then that would distract. And who knows? I might not have been here. I might have been calling Jason at 2:45, saying, bail me out, man. I'm in jail. But
I would
anyway,
absolutely do it.
these developments are actually good news for Trump, I think, because it does set the precedent that a state attorney general takes seriously, in theory, in this state, a $2 million fraud. Go to the next page.
Is it possible that Trump had them do it on purpose so that?
No.
Yeah, but Charles, there's a big difference between the Clinton Foundation and the Trump Foundation. The Trump Foundation, it was Trump's own money.
Right.
The Clinton Foundation is public's money.
Thank you for that.
Big difference.
Thank you for that tease. Now, there's the essential, and you realize that because you've been on this for a while. Our public needs to understand there is a gigantic difference between what's called a private foundation and a public charity. A private foundation would be if Fabien Chalandon, Jason Goodman, and Charles Hertel got together and said, we want to put our money and maybe raise a little bit more money from outsiders, but principally our money into a charity to do something interesting, to venerate the French and American relations or something
Drill
like that.
oil in Paris.
Well, no, that wouldn't be a charity. and we've already done that.
I know.
Yeah, we've done that already.
I know, that's why I said it.
Chateau Petroleum, our new wine brand. But anyway, so there's a very big difference between a public charity and a private foundation. A public charity cannot be controlled by a bunch of partisan left-wing hacks who are trying to kick Donald Trump out of office. Okay, it's got to be controlled by an independent board. It's got to be nonpartisan. It can't be involved making money for the creators of the charity. So when I heard this whistleblower aid was the name of a not-for-profit operation, I immediately punched it into the logical places I know about: ProPublica Nonprofit Explorer, the 990 Finder, and nothing came up. So I was a little bit more persistent, and I discovered that the real name of this thing, and actually a kind viewer sent me an email, because I mentioned on Twitter that I was trying to do this, and somebody said, actually the real name is Values United, and it was created on the 21st of April, 2009 in Louisiana.
Didn't you tell me that? I've heard of Values.
Yeah, I told you. Okay, so that was in 21st April 2009. We're going to show you how you can check this for yourselves in a second. On the 16th of August 2013, it was created in Louisiana. Louisiana revokes the authority of Values United to operate in its home state. Does that sound at all familiar to anybody in the viewership, or to you, Fabien? Massachusetts.
It looks, tastes like and smells like the Clintons.
Exactly.
You got to be pretty corrupt to get your license revoked in Louisiana. Seriously though, Louisiana, New Orleans was voted the most corrupt something or other. The FBI actually took over the New Orleans Police Department in the 1970s because of such intense corruption.
Right, I know. And we're not going to make any comments about the close affiliation between France and New Orleans. We're not going to bring that up.
Don't, yeah.
I didn't bring it up.
It's not the right chronology.
Okay, all right. So anyway,
That was after you took it.
okay, all right. Of that I'm sure. You're absolutely right. So the rules in this country are that you have to, if you want to get a tax-exempt entity, you have to create a nonprofit entity, in this case most likely a corporation. That was done on the 21st of April 2009. Obviously, the distinguished Compass Rose law firm doesn't know these rules, because I'm going to hope they don't know these rules, because if they knew them and screwed this up this badly, then they're really bad. You have to normally file for tax exemption within 27 months of the date that you incorporate, all right? So they, by 27 months, that's 2 years and 3 months. That's 2011 July, right? So for another 2 years and a month, they operated without filing for tax exemption and got their authority revoked. So using this entity, Values United, ordinarily they would never get through the IRS, because you're starting with something, it's a stillborn nonprofit that's basically got a horrible record. So they decided to change the name of the entity, and we'll show you how they did that. They did that wrong too. They did that Clinton style. So this thing is now dormant in Louisiana. On the 18th of November 2016, President-elect Trump picks Jeff Sessions. Now, Jeff Sessions is from Alabama. His full name is Jefferson Beauregard Sessions. And if you wanted to hold somebody out as potentially a racist, Southern cracker type person, you could do that if you wanted to paint the picture of this. And I think that's in essence what this crooked group of left-wing hacks have done here. This is not simply about the whistleblower. This is also about Charlottesville. The same team that tried to turn something that Trump's people did not set up in August of 2017 as an excuse to brand Trump as a racist, I think are intimately involved with this whistleblower aid thing. I'll show you the timeline. So on the 30th of January, one of his 10 days in, Trump fires the Attorney General Sally Yates, the acting Attorney General, because she wouldn't follow through on the immigration ban. That happened at around 9 p.m. We showed you the tweet before, but you could show it again here. There's a different story with this one here. Mark Zaid of this Compass Rose law firm tweets out on the same day, 54 minutes after Yates is fired, the coup has started. Okay? Now remember, this guy is being painted as nonpartisan. He's doing this whistleblower work in a charity. Trust him. You can believe that he has no agenda.
What about this tweet that he put out where he says he's helped people with child porn problems? I didn't realize he was hanging out with Podesta. No, I'm not joking.
Yeah,
did you see that
I
tweet?
I did see that.
What kind of idiot tweets that? This
kind of idiot.
A total dope.
Yeah. So, exactly. So, let's go back and stay on the timeline, though, if we may. So, Senate confirmed Sessions on the 8th of February. Now, on the 23rd of February 2017, somebody registers the domain name whistleblower.aid.org. Okay? The fact that you register a domain name does not mean that you've created a charity. So they must have realized that they weren't going to get Values United through normally. So they said, we better have another name. So they use this name, whistleblower.org. They start using that name. Several days later, on March 2nd, Sessions recuses himself from the Russiagate matter, right? So we're now in a zone where there is no Mueller, no special prosecutor, but these anti-Trump zealots, Zaid, McCulloch, the other lawyer, and we'll get to some other people in a second who are inside this whistleblower aid org, get together and they start firing themselves up. Sessions fires 46 sitting U.S. attorneys. Bear in mind, please, that Bill Clinton fired all the sitting U.S. attorneys in '93 to try to hide, in my opinion, the fact that at least one U.S. attorney was well down the path to going after the Clintons. So he said, to cover the tracks, said, well, why don't we just fire all of them? And that, of course, will also give us an opportunity to replace all of them with Clinton loyalists. So a huge hue and cry about that.
And that's the first time any president ever did that.
Right. And then we look here, though. I don't know if this is going to work, but the Values United gets reinstated on the 13th of March 2017. Maybe this will work and maybe it won't.
What do you mean, the search or whatever?
Yeah. Because maybe it does.
Search for Louisiana business filings.
This one here.
Continue. That guy looks very Louisiana.
Full Louisiana.
I have the etouffee.
Every day.
Yeah.
So just put Values United in here, please. And hit search.
Formalities. Where is that search?
Right here.
There we go. This website seems to be made by the same people who made the New York one. There we go.
Okay. Now, it says it's in good standing now, but you have to keep going down the page. Here are the people involved with it. John N. Ty, Lydia Bean, Lauren Bartlett replaced somebody called, we'll get to her name in a second. Keep going down the page. I think there's amendments on file. There's a history. Yeah, see, it says revoked 16th of August 2013, reinstated 13th of March 2017, changed a bunch of things starting September 15th, 2017, then in October 2019. If you go to the top of the page, or further up the page, it says this thing its domiciles is in New Orleans, but its mailing address is in Washington, D.C. Okay?
John Ty.
John Ty. John Napier Ty. Okay?
Napier.
Yeah. So let's go back into the...
You know what the name of the Joker is in Batman? Jack Napier.
There you go.
Is this a real name?
It is a real name.
All right. Back to the slides. Sorry.
It's okay.
There we go.
All right. So the rally in Charlottesville is on the 11th and 12th of August 2017. All right. By the 14th of August, Values United registers whistleblower aid in Washington, D.C. Okay? Now, it had been registering before then in Louisiana, saying that it was already in Washington, D.C. Now, we've been through this in the past. On the books, Washington, D.C. has very strict charity laws.
Yeah.
You have to have an organization, you have to fill out paperwork inside the place, and you have to be truthful. So, but they were operating, they were soliciting well before August 14th, 2017 in Washington, D.C. without registering. And then on the 19th, they register, they get the fictitious name on the 14th. On the 19th, they register the organization pretending that it had started work in D.C. on the 20th of March, 2017. Then on the 15th of November, 2018, they file what's called a Form 990, an annual report for Values United concerning 2017. And we have excerpts of that.
Someone is saying that Zaid has been photographed with Tony Podesta and the Clintons on Epstein Island. I haven't seen that photo.
I haven't either.
I'm interested in knowing about that.
Yeah, let's see it. So that's a lot of detail. Let's go into just a little bit more detail on the next page. Okay, these are excerpts from, and you have the Values United 2017 Form 990. Okay, remember I told you that Values United was created in April of 2009. So it didn't just spring out of nowhere in 2017. It had to have some operations in 2016. It had to file, it was called a Form 1023, an application for federal tax exemption, at some point to get their tax exemption, which they got. We have a copy of a letter that appears, we don't show it yet because we're still studying it, appears to me to be a forgery. It was put in supposedly on March 24th, 2017, and they received their tax exemption 6 days later on March 30th. And that is most unlikely. There's no signature page to the document. There are all kinds of flaws in it, but the document that they file for their 990 is there for you guys to look at in your own time. They say that in 2017 they had total revenues in the charity of $22,398. That's not nothing, but if you have total revenue in a year of $22,398, how do you spend $525,012 on program services? How do you spend another $117,000 on management in general? You only had $22,000. And credit conditions are easy in this country and around the world, but they're not so easy that you could walk into a bank or walk to somebody and say, hey, my total revenues are $22,000. Why don't you give me $600,000 to cover my costs? That's not going to happen. So it had a loss of $619,000, but somehow it ends up with $105,000 in cash, $27,000 in other assets, total assets of $133,000. And it's got payables. People are extending a trade credit of $179,000. It's got a loan from an executive or director, $273,000. Some other fool has given it $300,000. So it has liabilities of $750,000, assets of let's see, where's that? Yeah, total assets of $133,000, a gigantic negative net worth of $619,717, and the 990 does not tell you exactly when this started operating in 2017 and when it ended. But when you get into the details, what you discover are the people who lent the money. The 273,605 was lent by John Napier Tye, the CEO, to the charity. The 300,000 was lent to the charity by John Napier Tye's father.
What?
Yeah, that's impossible. You can't do that and have a public charity, right? There's way too much, pressure on the charity from the Tye family. None of this is disclosed properly. This thing, as bad as some of the worst Clinton Foundation 990s are, this is worse. Because if we flip the page, who is this John Napier Tye? John Tye, look at his background. He went to Duke. He was a Rhodes Scholar. He went to Yale Law School, and he worked at the Southern Poverty Law Center, which has had to wind up and kick out its founder because it's so crooked. Okay? You have this chair, Lydia Beam. Remember, you're not supposed to be somebody involved in politics, is running for office as a left-leaning Democrat in Texas, the chair of it. The person whose name was replaced in October 2019, likely because she's so controversial, is somebody named Nusrat Chaudhuri, who was the director of the ACLU, which is a hard left organization in this country, racial justice program. She was the treasurer of this operation in 2017 and on the board. And some idiotic firm, Kronzek, Fisher, and Lopez, they could be worse perhaps than BKD, they lent their name to this 990, which is a complete disaster. So remember when you started talking about charities, Fabien, in the beginning of this, you noted that there's a difference between a public charity and a private foundation. This is not independent from the Tye family. This is certainly a partisan organization, and it's fundamentally bankrupt. So, how does a law firm like the Compass Rose Law Firm, which includes 3 partners, somebody who is the former Inspector General for the intelligence community, how do they get involved with this thing? This is transparently a coup attempt being financed in part by this charity and by the law firm who's extending credit to these whistleblowers. This is very similar to what Williams and Connolly was doing for the Clintons. They couldn't pay. Williams and Connolly, the lawyers for the Clintons, allowed the Clintons to run up bills with another firm that totaled, I think, $14 million when Bill Clinton had no money.
Why are they always getting a law firm involved? Why do they need a law firm to do
Because people are intimidated. If you get a letter from a real law firm, and
I haven't gotten any of those.
Well, I've been like a big real law firm,
fake,
like a husky famous law firm that says, I'm the big gun, top gun at some big law firm, and we're going to sue you for this and that and the other thing, and you go take it to your lawyer or some other lawyer, and they say, they go, whoa, just to fight this, even you're going to have to settle this.
Right.
Because they can outspend you and they can out this and that.
This is such a major component of the strategy, I think, of any lawyer, is this intimidation and this whole, it's going to cost you so much just to answer this, that's your first consideration. So that's it. They figure they get a beefy lawyer behind it, and you break through a bunch of barriers that way.
But you see, where this falls apart is there were only 3 directors of this thing, right? That's the minimum number of directors. One of them's heavily conflicted, John Tye. Right? Because he's lending money to the organization. He's making a loan he should not make. What were the terms of that loan? And we've learned recently that while he was doing all this, they also, in this time frame in September, I think I don't know the date, I'll have to go back and look at it. Recently, I believe, they set up a GoFundMe account to simultaneously raise non-tax deductible contributions that would, in theory, or no, tax-deductible contributions that would be sent to this thing. And on the GoFundMe page of this thing, it says Whistleblower Aid is a public charity, a tax-exempt charity, which I don't think it validly is. Mm-hmm. So I reported them moments ago.
Nice.
Well, are you sure they are lawyers?
Well, they're liars.
Yes. No, it's either they're not lawyers.
No, they're lawyers.
Or they got their law degree in the lottery, one way or the other, or they are really crooks.
Yeah.
real crooks.
Well, I think what they are is they're social justice warriors. There's this angle that we understand I understand as a social justice warrior that the history of law is the history of oppression. The rich people write the laws. It's to protect the rich. But this is the way I've heard this argument.
Charging $800 an hour to tell you about what rich people do.
Right, exactly. But no, I mean, this is the way they think, and they say these laws are unjust, fundamentally unjust. We are going to remake the world. So we don't need to worry about these pesky little laws and details. Our noble aims are to make a new and more powerful world that will benefit the underclass, lessen inequality, stop climate change, on and on and on and on. And on that basis, you believe you could do anything. And we all know people who think like that. Unfortunately, many of them were in the Obama administration, and many of them are in the administrations of many governments around the world even today.
Well, Al Capone was thinking like that too.
Yeah, he never did have a Capone Foundation.
But he did get pinched for tax evasion.
He didn't need to. He didn't need to.
Yeah. So if we jump then, we've got a few more slides. This is, again, the pretext, Fabien, here is we've got November 15th is the final filing deadline to refile the Clinton Foundation tax returns. A whole bunch of returns, applications for federal tax exemption went in on Forms 1023 for this thing called Clinton Health Access Initiative, for Clinton Global Initiative. They didn't do any such thing for Clinton Climate Initiative, or for Clinton Hunter Development Initiative, or for Clinton Justra Sustainable Growth Initiative in this country. So when you go and you look at combining financial statements, which are available in New York State, but which are hidden purposely on the Clinton Foundation website, you see that the unauthorized activities, unauthorized revenues of the Clinton Foundation in 2009 were $232 million, whereas in a best case, the pro forma authorized part of the foundation was $17 million, meaning that the unauthorized piece was 13 times the authorized piece. And again,
what was the authorized piece? Yeah.
The Little Rock.
The authorized piece in 2009.
This is my estimate. It's the presidential center, and that's a conservative estimate. I think its actually spending is less than 17 million, but I use a conservative estimate of just saying everything else. Let's assume that's Little Rock, when it isn't, because it's Alliance for a Healthier Generation. It's a few other things, but so this shows that the revenues of unauthorized activities were 13 times the authorized activities, and the legal standard is you've got to. The money that you raise has to be used exclusively for your authorized purposes. Here, 13 times the money that went for the authorized purpose went to the unauthorized purpose. Then on expenses, 14.8 times the expenses that were spent in Little Rock went on unauthorized activities. And you do the math, it's a little funny. All in, the profit, in theory, the notional profit from unauthorized activities was almost 5 times the authorized. So, I mean, you look at this, it's obvious why BKD and the Clinton Foundation and lawyers wanted to hide this. I mean, this is an unbelievable indictment of the whole process under Obama, when Hillary was Secretary of State, of attempting to reorganize these various entities, which they did by sending applications using the mail across state lines that were false and materially misleading, knowingly so, by having BKD and other accounting firms either decide to hold their noses and not look at any of this and fly blind, or alternatively, under real cross-examination, you can discover that BKD knew all about this and just was told, look, Barack's going to be president for 2 terms. Don't worry, Hillary will follow. You're never going to get caught. Just shut up, do this, and you'll get all kinds of new business, and just be an accountant and be boring.
I think somebody like Eric Hansen has got a lot to worry about if he looks back historically over the timeline of people who have worked with the Clintons and known about stuff that the Clintons don't want other people to know about.
Yeah, it's not the deplorables. I think it's called the expendables.
Yeah, right, exactly. That's a movie we should make the poster and put all the, Vince Foster and all the different.
There we go. There we go. So that's one strand that has obviously still been covered up. Here's another strand. The 2010 known financial statements of the Clinton Foundation. Now remember, to make this simple for the non-numbers people, red is bad. When you see red things on the page, that's bad. You don't want to see all red. So in the first instance, the reported audits and Forms 990 that concern 2010 for William J. Clinton Foundation, I put it in quotes because that's not its proper legal name in 2010. Clinton Health Access Initiative, Inc. is not an organization in 2009 and 10 because they didn't get their bylaws signed off until early February 2010, but they filed a tax-exempt application on December 31st, 2009. So that's not a real thing. Clinton Global Initiative, same idea. They had articles of incorporation on the 4th of September 2009, but only had bylaws signed August 14th, 2010. So none of these are actually technically real legal entities. The audit for the first one, that should have been an audit for everything, consolidated everything, but it said it's for bits and pieces of something they want to include and others they just leave out. The audit was incorrectly performed in 2011 for 2010. They restated their financial results in 2015, but they never amended their audit because they dramatically restated their results. They should have amended their audit. Staying on this William J. Clinton Foundation and being really, really simple, Jason in the audience, there's two ways of tracking your profit. One, or the change in your profit. One is to look at all of your revenues in a period, all of your expenses, and what's left over in the charity, because there's no taxes, is your profit. That's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is to do a balance sheet check. The preceding year you do it and you say, what are all my assets, what are all my liabilities? The difference are your net assets. Do the same thing at the end of this year. What are all my assets, what are all my liabilities? You get a new number, you check the two numbers, and by the means of looking at revenues and expenses, and by the means of checking your balance sheets, the result should be absolutely the same. The change in net assets on your income statement must equal the change in net assets comparing your balance sheets for the two different year ends. Absolutely, there's no debate. There's no need in bringing in AOC or having Bill Clinton debate the meaning of the word is. There's no reason for a difference, okay? But when you look at the filing that was submitted on November 14th, 2011, the activities asserted a $34,153,491 profit in the Clinton Foundation for 2010. But when you compare the balance sheets, it said the actual balance sheet net assets went down by $925,603. So that's an error of $35 million. Even BKD should have been able to catch that error. I mean, that's an egregious error, right? They then restate this entity, William J. Clinton Foundation, in 2015 for 2010, and they say, you know, where we told you the profit and the difference between revenues and expenses was $34 million, it actually was $16.7 million. Now, again, when somebody does that to me, you know, you've given me statements that say I made $34 million, and now you come back to me 4 years later and say, no, really, all you made was $16 million. My reaction is to fire the accountants, fire the chief financial officer, fire the directors, fire the CEO, fire everybody connected with this, because I have no confidence in the control systems of an entity that could tell me with a straight face and ask me to file forms with the IRS and across state lines and in foreign countries where I claim I have a profit of $34 million. Now you want me to say it was only 16.7. It's not a small issue, right? Nonetheless, and again, that's the income statement approach. When you compare the balance sheets, they say, but your balance sheet moved the same way. It was down $925,603. So you still have a $17.7 million error in your core foundation on with regard to 2010. And that error stands uncorrected today, November 10th, 2019, within the 5-year statute of limitations period for financial statements in the United States. That's the core. Clinton Health Access Initiative, like the parent, which was originally called the William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation, this thing sprang into existence on the 29th of September 2009, and it was large in 2009. It operated, as we showed you in the preceding page, it was the biggest piece of the Clinton Foundation, its predecessor operation. So there's no statement for 2009 from the 29th of September 2009 to the 31st of December 2009, as there should be. Okay, so they didn't do that, which means that their filings there's no statute of limitations on the Clinton Health Access Initiative because they didn't file the tax return for 2009. That's a problem.
They must have been busy.
That's a real big problem. But then the same idea, their 2010 initial statement of activities, they say they had a loss of $4.8 million in this Clinton Health Access Initiative for the year, but somehow, starting with zero balance at the beginning of the year, their net assets, checking balance sheets, are $15.2 million, meaning there's a $20 million overstatement and error in Clinton Health Access Initiative. They restate this on the 21st of November 2013, and they say, well, before we said it was $4.8 million, now it's $2.5 million loss, and our balance sheet's the same, 15.2, so our error is $17.7 million. I mean, these are not trivial errors here. I mean, you forgive somebody $100 or $1, or maybe $1,000, but not errors of this magnitude in, two of the three largest pieces of the Clinton Foundation that are reporting. Then you get the Clinton Global Initiative. Doug Band, or some idiot working with Doug Band, files a short period return for the Clinton Global Initiative where they say they had no revenues and no expenses in 2009. One sec. But that's not true. According to the Form 1023 that they filed the next year, in 2010, they say that they had 24 million of revenues and 23 million of expenses. So that's, total lies. 2010 initial 990, they never do an audit for Clinton Global Initiative, even though under New York and where Clinton Global Initiative is headquartered functionally, New York requires an audit for something this big. They never do one. They say that they made an $11.7 million loss, but by the balance sheet check, you come up with $3.1 million. They end up with $3.1 million. So that's a $14.9 million error. And they never, when they amend the parent company, Clinton Foundation, they don't go back and amend the Clinton Global Initiative. So, I mean, this is, sometimes, you work with people and you say, everybody has potential. And, it's like my mother one day, she really wanted me, my dear departed mother really wanted me to be good at music because she was so good at music. And so she'd be in the apartment and I'd be in the back of the apartment on the piano, slaughtering everybody's eardrums. And it finally came to a point where she came in and she said, Charles, you could stop now. To go to the park and play tennis, whatever you want. Music is not for you. With this, you look at this and you say, Mr. Kessel, Mr. Lindsay, Kevin Thurm, certainly BKD, certainly Cohn Resnick, and any of the people, the Simpson Thatcher crowd, the lawyers, you're never going to get this right. You haven't been able to get it right for 20 years, 20 plus years. And this thing needs a conservator. It needs a new person to rush in here. And that, I think, is what's going to happen once we see what they file on the November 15th deadline, which is 5 days away. This is attempts have been made to fix it, and they just make it worse. I mean, do you have a reaction to any of this, Fabien?
Oh, I think, it's a process which has been going on for 20 years. As you rightly said in previous shows, there was already a big mistake the last 3 months of 1997, where they didn't file for that short period of time, and that compounds over 20 years with each year some additional mistake done. It's intractable. Yeah. It becomes intractable. But at the same time, the test you've been doing, which both you and I have been trained to do this test as part of our investment banking background and even accounting background, between the balance sheet test and the cash flow test, and it's something rather basic for an accountant. So, as we've seen before, we have fake lawyers. Now we have fake accountants.
Right.
And working with fake charities. That's a great picture you're depicting. And that has to stop. And if they can't stop the Clinton Foundation, then there's a big problem in the U.S. That's for sure.
Right. Yeah, I mean, they have fake lawyers, fake accountants, fake financial statements, fake
news.
trustees, fake news, and real money. And the problem is the real money's missing. That's one hell of a statement.
Well, yeah, but and the reason why is that fake foundations have been used massively over the past 20 years to launder money.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the main vehicle today to launder money. Because banks are not checking because they are foundations.
Right.
And this is the key issue now today. There's no issue with offshore bank accounts because the net has tightened a lot with the various regulations implemented by both the US, the EU, and the OECD. The real black hole today is foundations, and again foundations. And you have provided ample examples of that already for the US now. That's the US, but what about international foundations?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Black Hole of Calcutta Foundation.
We've got a lot of very clever people in the comments here, Charles. Thomas Tyson was remarking on your ability to weaponize the piano, but people want to know if, and maybe at the end we can do this, if you can explain a little bit more about exactly what happened to the Trump Foundation and where that's all at. I think people are worried about the president, want to make sure everything's
You want
cool.
to do that quickly now?
Sure.
Yeah, so the Trump Foundation has gotten in trouble for two things. The first was that while Donald Trump was a businessman, he or his people decided it would be smart to create a program called the Trump University, wherein students were encouraged to pay substantial fees to go to lectures to learn how to make money in real estate. And they made the mistake, it's a good question actually, as you'll see shortly. It was a good lead into the next few slides. They made the mistake of not, in New York State, going to the Department of Education and securing approval for the use of the word education, because you can't advertise yourself as being a university in New York State unless you go through a rigorous vetting process by our Department of Education and actually other departments to check and make sure that you have the capacity to teach. You have people who are actually qualified to teach. So Trump's people did not do that, and in consequence, in 16, after he won the election, before he was inaugurated, he settled a long-standing feud between the Attorney General and himself, or his operation, and agreed to pay a $25 million fine and just turn a page on that. That's one set of issues. That's bad, what they did. Okay, I'm not trying to excuse that. I'm not trying to say, Trump's perfect and Clinton's are wrong. I am anti-charity fraud, anti-fraud, and I don't like to see powerful people in particular committing fraudulent activities and getting away with it, because that just encourages the fraudster community to take it to another level. The second one is the recent thing, the $2 million thing, and that's where, and at the time when it happened, I winced, because I was in the midst in 16 of exposing 15, 16 of exposing, or starting to expose the Clinton Foundation. Donald Trump was in 16. It was right around the time of the Iowa caucus. And he decided that he wanted, if there was some issue, I forget what it was, that he wanted to raise money for veterans. And rather than, and then he wanted to present checks to veterans. And rather than changing the purposes of his foundation and getting the approvals required in the various states to solicit money, he just went ahead and right before the Iowa primaries allowed himself to be pictured with these gigantic oversized checks that he turned over to various Iowa veterans-related charities.
Is Ed McMahon still alive? No.
Huh?
Ed McMahon is not still alive.
I don't think he is.
He'd be good to have around one of those giant checks.
Exactly. So those are the two ones that I know about. Not trying to make light of them. Both are problems, but both pale into insignificance in comparison to the Clinton Foundation charities, which are denominated in the multi-billion, $10 billion, $100 billion category. In Donald Trump's case, he got into trouble with those charities giving away his own money sloppily, and certain large contributors did give money, but the bulk of the money that went into the Trump Foundation, then out as expenses, was his money. And doesn't mean it's okay for you to make mistakes with your money, but it's a different story to badly manage your own foundation than it is to create fake foundations. I mean, at least Trump's foundation actually existed. To create a whole slew of foundations to take money from governments while your wife's Secretary of the State or in the Senate and standing there to maybe be a presidential candidate in the future, or President of the United States. It's a very different scale in the case of the Clinton Foundation and scope, and it's really major league multinational grifting in the case of the Clintons. In the case of Trump, I think it's sloppiness.
If I may add one point to that, I don't think Mr. Trump diverted money or made it disappear. In the case of the Clinton Foundation, if I go back to the period 2007 to 2009, which we intensively studied, Charles,
right?
Especially the period where UNITAID, which was funded mostly by French taxpayers' money, sent a lot of money to the Clinton Foundation. And assuming there is no other government grant over that period, there is already about $77.4 million missing in the reporting by the Clinton Foundation. And if you had what we know of government grants that have been granted over that period, the actual number is probably over $300 million. So, that's diversion.
That's right.
And that's a serious issue. Well, it's not mishandling of charity laws. This is using charity to divert money for other purposes.
Well, even to flip it around a little bit, there's a market for influence. And when you start holding yourself out as a plausible presidential candidate or plausible candidate to be president of the United States, people will look at that and say, okay, what do I want out of Chalandon? What do I want out of Goodman? What do I want out of Ortel? Can he win? And if you start doing the calculation, you've got a large tax problem or an antitrust problem or this problem or that problem, you're willing to, particularly if you think the way people in the Middle East, rich people, Fabien and I know in the Middle East who like to race horses think this way, if you control, let's say, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and you're never going to starve for money, and somebody says that you can have enormous influence over any of the next presidents of the United States by shelling out $100 million. That's less than you spend on your racehorses in a year. I mean, it's not. You look at that, and Fabien and I have had conversations with people over in the Middle East who we know think this way, that it's our presidential candidates are purchased far more cheaply than they should be purchased. And a prime way to do that is through a presidential charity. Nobody can fault a foreigner for contributing to a presidential charity that's validly organized. I mean, it's a lawful charity, right? On the other hand, you can't, as the King of Saudi Arabia, write a check to Bill Clinton for $100 million and just say, it's for your wife. I mean, that's a bribe, okay? But $100 million into the charity...
It's also way too much to pay for his wife.
Exactly.
Like $50.
20. Yeah,
it's like one of those, like a 1980 Buick. You got to pay somebody $25 to get it out of here.
Right. Or what's
that's why I was saying that today the biggest hole in the financial system, which allows massive laundering of funds, are the foundations.
Exactly.
And the misuse of a foundation, which is much more general than one would think, and to which a lot of governments have knowingly participated in one way or the other.
Sure.
Whether it's in the US or in Europe. And we know in Europe there are some similar cases as well.
Right, emulating the Clinton Foundation. I mean, there are quite a few former leaders of various countries. We could, Tony Blair. We could name a bunch of them, different countries, who watched this Clinton Foundation, and then said we can do that. And then you look at the Barack Obama Foundation. I mean, his people have looked at this and said we could do this. We'll just do it on a bigger scale in Chicago.
I remember a French former prime minister in 2006 He was just, I won't name him, but I'm sure you can find his name easily. And his first, when asked what he was going to do after being prime minister, he said, well, I'm going to build up my own foundation. And you know what? He didn't do it. Thank God for him.
Good. Good. Well, we've just got, I think, 4 more slides. So let's quickly go through them.
Oh wait, we didn't do this one yet.
Yeah, we did. We just
Okay.
did that one.
There we go.
All right, so remember I told you, you asked me what did Trump do wrong. Remember I told you that you can't set up something called a university without actually getting it registered. You got to get it authorized. So here are excerpts from a press release from the Clinton Foundation on Valentine's Day 2009. And the press release is there for people who want to read the whole thing, where President Clinton announced that something called the Clinton Global Initiative University, remember I said you can't use the word university, is going to create some awards and do it jointly with the Pat Tillman Foundation and the Walmart Foundation. Now, this is February 14th, 2009, Jason. Is that before September 4th, 2009?
I believe it is.
Just checking,
Yeah.
just making sure. So the Clinton Global Initiative, Inc. was incorporated on September 4th, 2009. They're dumb enough in their Form 1023 to brag about these activities that happened before they set up the organization, disqualifying it from being an organization, and then even dumber in the 1023 to say that they had no predecessor operations, when here you have predecessor operations. So Pat Tillman, Fabien, in case you don't know who that person is a now deceased hero who was an American football player who could have just played football and made a lot of money, but felt watching his comrades in arms and his friends who were in our all-volunteer army that he owed a duty to this country to fight. And he was killed, and we're not exactly sure how. Some believe it's a friendly fire incident, but he died. And there is a foundation, it's a legitimate foundation, that I think was hoodwinked here. This is, remember, February 14th, 2009 is the early days of the Obama administration. I'm going to guess that the Tillman Foundation it's in Texas, it probably has quite a few Republicans involved with it, and they probably thought they were genuinely going to do something good with with this former Bill Clinton, who had no connection whatsoever, official connection to the Clinton Global Initiative, because it didn't exist. So they team with that. They do a whole bunch.
Before we move off of Pat Tillman, I don't think it was just a matter of friendly fire. I think it's suspected he was killed because he was going to blow the whistle on something.
Maybe this. Well, no, not this, because he was killed in 2004.
Something to do with the war.
He was killed in 2004. But alongside the Tillman Foundation, which I think was hoodwinked, was the Walmart Foundation. And they, I think, have been dirty for a long time. They gave money to the Bush-Clinton-Katrina Foundation, which did not lawfully exist. They didn't care. They've given money to the Clinton Foundation. They don't seem to care that it's not a real foundation. But here, a lot of decisions were made. A lot of grants, applications were solicited. 42 awards were made. The paperwork on all this that would show that the Clinton Global Initiative University definitely existed in theory and was operating in practice to solicit money from the Tillman Foundation and Walmart Foundation to then give money away to all of that activity is fraud across state lines. There is no Clinton Global Initiative University. They had no right to solicit these people for these awards, no right to give these awards away. And here's Bill Clinton saying, you know what? I'll do what I want. Barack Obama's president, my wife's Secretary of State. I'm going to issue a press release saying I did this when I'm not an officer, I'm not a director, and there is no Clinton Global Initiative University. Other than that, there's nothing wrong with it.
People are saying
It's unbelievable.
Tillman was definitely killed.
Yeah, okay. So we need to figure out why Tillman was killed, but let's keep going through the slides quickly, because I'm mindful of the time, and it's late. So yeah, this is more from that same press release, and in that press release it says, President Clinton launched the Clinton Global Initiative University in 2008. Well, what did they say? No, he didn't. No, he didn't, because there was no Clinton Global Initiative University at any time. Okay? And in 2009, the meeting was held February 13th, 15th in Texas. Now, Texas takes a dim view of fraud, in theory, but this is bold fraud. The first university meeting, I think, was held in Louisiana, another state that, in theory, should care about fraud. And so what happens with this thing, or the way they tried to do it, is this non-existent university encourages students to make commitments of things they want to do that are then, in this case, were funded by the Pat Tillman Foundation and funded by the Walmart Foundation. Now, in 2009, when you go into the Pat Tillman Foundation 990, you discover that the $200,000 grant was made to something called the Clinton Global Initiative, but the identification number, the EIN that they use, is not the Clinton Global Initiative's number's EIN. So I don't think I would guess the foundation actually gave the money away.
Well, he was going to blow the whistle on opium trade in Afghanistan, is what everybody's saying. So what does this organization do, this foundation?
It's in his honor, just to help, I think, families of veterans who died in service. I think it's a good foundation, Pat Tillman, are meant to be good. So they were hoodwinked by the Clintons in 2009. Their paperwork has their largest grant by far, $200,000, going to a Clinton Global Initiative with an incorrect EIN. And then they don't seem to be doing any work with the Clinton Global Initiative afterwards. So I think the Pat Tillman Foundation was hoodwinked, whereas the Walmart Foundation was like, we know these Clintons. I mean, we gave birth to the Clintons. He was governor, he's attorney general, governor. He's good for us at Walmart.
Interesting that Peter Smith was buying his helium from Walmart.
Was it Walmart?
Oh yeah, we went to that Walmart.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, that's a logical thing to do, right?
Well, it's the only place around there that would even hope to have helium, but there were a lot of people who had a lot of stuff to say about Walmart around there.
Right.
Not so good stuff.
So on the question of the Trump University issues, they're covered in this link. We don't have to put it up now because we're flying, I think. But I would say that the heart of the Clinton Foundation fraud is the Clinton Global Initiative. And here you have a link to the page describing all the commitments to action. We've been through this before. There are thousands of them that the FBI should be investigating. I bet that very few of them were legitimate.
Well, I'd like to see one commitment to action from the FBI to investigate something.
Yeah. So Fabien, this is a new one you may not have seen before. In California, they send this attachment to a filing the Clinton Foundation does. This is a filing for the Clinton Global Initiative where in their 1023 they'd said, the thing that was issued in August of 2010, they said, we have no predecessor activities. That is to say, we did nothing before September 4th, 2009. But to California...
Rings a bell.
Yeah, but to California, they say in 2005, which I think, Jason, is before 2009, the William J. Clinton Foundation established the Clinton Global Initiative, Inc. No, it didn't. There was no such entity in 2005. Okay, and lie after lie after lie in the files in California, has been in the file for a long time in California, same lies in other states. They say one thing to the IRS, no prior activities in their annual reports, which are marketing puff pieces. They describe a lot of that's up on their website, to different state regulators. They say, yeah, we operated starting in 2005. But what they don't explain are the substantial connections between Teneo Inc. and Doug Band, the various Teneo entities. Doug Band, who was being paid by the Clinton Foundation in this period, was raising money for the Clinton Foundation, but had built now a substantial entity today called Teneo and its various affiliates. They don't explain any of that in these filings, which you have to explain. And they don't also explain something which I'm going to break a little bit more news. The fellow called Declan Kelly, who's an Irishman, and very smooth talking, very glib person, good marketing person, built up a communications firm initially called FD that he then sold to something called FTI. And his story to the public was that he was going to accept no salary to be he's Irish, America's envoy to Northern Ireland. Mm-hmm. And that allowed him to swan around the world and meet CEOs or whatever. The reality is that he had a not so secret, because I found it, deal to be paid bonus compensation for developing business after he sold out to FTI for periods that included his time as Secretary, Special Envoy to Northern Ireland, wherein he also got, outrageously high reimbursement of expenses and living expenses, not salary, but living expenses. He disclosed none of this, but you can find it. There's a link here to an FTI press release, but if you go into the SEC Edgar Services, which is our master file in all public companies, and you look up FTI in the 2006 timeframe, you will find what I'm talking about, if you look hard. And I've found it, so if I can find it, others can find it. So this group of liars, of really bad liars, lies about the existence of all these charities, lies about whether they are, their filings are accurate, lies under oath, lies across state lines, lies using emails, lies to their lawyers, lie to their accountants, find, for better measure, get some lying accountants and lying lawyers and lying directors and lying media people to spin a tale full of lies about how the selfless service of Bill Clinton. We're going to close. We've heard a lot from Bill Clinton's pious statements. I do this for the good of mankind. Great story done in 2016. Bill Clinton gets $17.6 million from Laureate.
Right.
This for-profit thing. Here's a link to the story, the original announcement of his role, April 27th, 2010, before the first midterm elections when Barack Obama was president. Imagine if, when Barack Obama was running for re-election by 2012, if the public had known just how crooked Hillary Clinton's State Department and the Clinton Foundation were in 2012, there is no way Barack Obama would have won re-election, which would have meant that we would have been subjected even now to 2 terms of Mitt Romney, which would have, I think it wouldn't have been as bad, but it would have also been miserable for other reasons. But this is a material fact here. This arrangement had to be known throughout the State Department because Laureate is operating all over the world, Justice Department. Many people had to know about this. No charity regulator decided that it was material to say, well, wait a minute, you're operating Clinton Global Initiative, tiny thing, it's losing money, and Bill Clinton's making $17.6 million off of Laureate for being honorary chairman. I mean, I'll take a job as honorary chairman of something, do
For
no work,
17 million?
get $17.6 million while my wife is Secretary of State. This is preposterous stuff. $17.6 million in New York State. That's just the beginning of it. There's more to that tale we could go and talk about, but it's getting late. And the Attorney General of New York tells us that $2 million is a number that she would take seriously. Here's $17.6 million, and note to the Attorney General, $17.6 million is bigger than $2 million. So it's a more serious problem. So with that, Fabien, I hope I haven't put you to sleep.
No, not at all. No, I'm just pondering why the attorneys, the prosecutors in New York, for example, have not moved on the Clinton Foundation at all, at least from what we know or what the public knows, and it's been going on for quite a while. Well, so that's a serious question, not only in New York but in Washington too.
Well, there was actually a very well-known blackmailer who was incarcerated in New York, Fabien. I wonder if that has anything to do with why people aren't prosecuting various people. If they say he's dead.
Epstein.
Right. Are you suggesting that everybody should have an accident in these matters?
Well, I'm going to have a little bit
of... It happened already, so...
Yeah. I mean, they said he's dead, but the debate that came up this past week was, did he kill himself or would somebody else killed him? But there's a third question that's yet to be properly asked. Is he dead?
Is the body that was found the body
actually Epstein?
Did that actually happen?
That's the question, isn't it? Yes, exactly. Did that actually happen? Well, we've come almost to the end, but Fabien, is there anything you'd like to share with us? You've stayed up very late.
Yeah, no, it's not too late for me. Don't worry. It's much more civilized for me to do it from Europe than from Japan.
And thank you for that.
and I know Michael Smith did it from a similar type of jet lag, and it's terrible for the body and the brain. So I'm not yet brain damaged yet. Don't worry. I have one thing to raise for the future, which is linked to not only the Clinton Foundation but to Benghazi. I read that General Flynn was framed because he knew too much about the Clinton Foundation, but also because as a former head of DNI, denounced the Obama-Clinton sick, I would call sick, foreign policy in Syria and in Libya. And by sick, I mean when the US government, with some of its allies like Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and a few others, including France, decided to fund the opposition, Mr. Assad, knowing that this opposition mainly comprised Al-Qaeda, and as you all know, the ISIS branch was spun off from Al-Qaeda. So basically, this group of countries armed, funded, and trained Al-Qaeda to try to topple Mr. Assad. I call this a very sick foreign policy. And you've seen the results. And I not only want to say this in France, and I not only want to say this in America as well. But in America, it's still a taboo. Yeah. That lies at the core of the Benghazi issue.
Well, and Flynn famously said it in an interview on RT. He came right out and said that the creation of ISIS was deliberate, and that was sort of like the end.
Yeah, and it was a creation by the Saudis, actually.
Well, originally. I think he was implying Obama and Hillary with the Saudis had created it.
Yeah. But there was, I think from what I've read in various books published by actually non-US journalists, but backed on research done by American people, the CIA outsourced a lot of its operations in the Middle East to the Saudi secret services, and when they didn't, they actually were funded by the Saudi government to bypass the disclosing laws with Congress. So you have another element of what I would call the sick US foreign policy, which is to bypass its counterpowers and bodies that are supposedly controlling it, and it basically went out of control. And is this not an issue, a real issue in the US? Not quite. It's an issue in Europe. Okay, we had severe bombings organized by ISIS, including in France, and including people killed or wounded, and some of them are not close to me, but are close to some friends. So it's I don't know why or how the Obama-Clinton policy and people applying it, why it went out of control, and what is the explanation? Did they blow a fuse or a cable? My children would say. Were they brainless? What was their rationale behind all this? That's a major issue because it must stop.
Well, try to answer the question, I think a prime target for any such investigation is John Brennan, the head of the CIA.
That's for sure. And he's number one.
Right.
He's number one.
And Clapper, of course. But going further back, I think I was watching somewhere people raking Donald Rumsfeld over the coals. I mean, we can go much further back into the Reagan era, and when the Reagan administration thought it was a smart idea, and then afterwards also, H.W. Bush it began with Rumsfeld thinking it's a good idea to get cozy to Saddam Hussein to go after Iran. And then later, under Clinton, some bright bulb said, why don't we, to destabilize the Soviet Union further, and maybe it's before Clinton, let's destabilize the Soviet Union further by financing Osama bin Laden. I mean, we have made a bunch of really stupid decisions. Really stupid. And anytime you want to try to discuss them, you end up in this, the guy whose name can't be uttered situation where when you get close to the truth, you better not bring that up, because now you're going to get kicked off Facebook, Twitter, Google, Amazon, your bank
You're going to
accounts.
get sued.
You're going to get sued. If you get to the truth of the matter and expose the corruption, well, that's wrong. So we need help in this country. We need governments around the world to make a calculated decision and say, which approach do you want? Do you want a world where there's no justice and where you're never going to be all that powerful and chaos is going to reign? Or is it time to go back and look at this last 30 years and longer and say, the experiment in unregulated globalism did not work very well, particularly for some of the bigger countries with wealth. Maybe it's time to finally, land on these crooks, get back to encourage nation states to be responsible global citizens, but to actually control their territory. So you don't have nations like Sweden that are, no one knows who really runs Sweden, or increasingly some other countries, even the UK. You go out in the UK now, and there are no-go zones in the UK.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. We should speak to Biljana about how things are going over there in Sweden. Charles, before we wrap it up this evening, I wanted to share with our viewers, I've been doing a little bit of research into just sort of general topics of interest. And I found in the Internal Revenue Code this little tidbit. I feel like you probably know this, Charles, but under the Internal Revenue Code, all Section 501c3 organizations are absolutely prohibited from directly or indirectly participating in or intervening in any political campaign on behalf of or in opposition to any candidate for elective public office, contributions to political campaign funds, or public statements of position, verbal or written, made on behalf of the organization in favor of or in opposition to any candidate for public office, clearly violate the prohibition against political campaign activities. So, for instance, if someone,
Hypothetically speaking,
if someone who maybe was an ex-CIA officer who had a 501c3, an ex-CIA employee, who had a 501c3 and started spouting off about who he thinks should replace the vice president as the vice presidential candidate for 2020, it seems like this would prevent that person from doing that in the context of activities regarding the 501c3. It might even be charity fraud if the person did that.
Yeah. I mean, it's this
What
whole
about Soros?
Yeah, Soros. This whole area is, of course, not administered properly. You have a lot of this activity of charities and then political action committees and campaigns cohabitating in the same office building, sharing employees, sharing vendors, sharing events, is an area that no one really wants to regulate because it implicates people. To date, no one wants to regulate because it implicates both parties. And it does so over decades in this country. But now I think there's a growing phenomenon where independent voters, an increasing percentage, large percentage of the American population, sees itself today as independent. I know I do. I don't care about either party. Both parties have made a bollocks, as they say in the UK, out of this 6.5 trillion in annual spending on government. I mean, you should be able to do with a third of that. You should be able to do a lot better than we're presently doing with 6.5 trillion per year. So you're right, Jason, to flag it. It's an area that is rife with abuse, and it shouldn't be that way.
That's right. Well, Charles, I think it is time to say hasta la vista, baby, to Le Terminator. Fabien, thank you so much for joining us today. This is a great picture. I'll email it to you. This could become your new Twitter profile.
Absolutely. Well, guys, thank you very much, and I will be back.
Absolutely. There you go.
Very good.
Very well said. Very well said.
Take care. Take care.
Bye bye. Au revoir.
And thanks a lot for our viewers to have been patient listening to what I had to say as well.
Thank you.
So, bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Ciao.
Bye-bye. There we go, Charles. Another great episode with the great Fabien Chalandon.
Very good. And we'll be back closing in on Wednesday.
Closing in on Wednesday. Thanks for watching, everybody. Don't forget to become a sponsor of Crowdsource the Truth. Go to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Can't keep the shows coming without your sponsorship and support. And sponsors of the show get access to a tremendous library of sponsor-exclusive content. And I hope that people will go over there. Have a great evening. See everybody tomorrow.